There is one number a woman will almost never tell you the truth about. Not because she forgot it, but because she knows exactly what would happen if you knew it. Your perception of her would shift instantly. The softness you imagined, the innocence you projected, the emotional value you believed was there, it would all collapse in seconds. And here is the uncomfortable part. Modern culture trains you to ignore this reality. You are told the past does not matter. That experience equals empowerment. That intimacy leaves no psychological footprint, but biology does not care about modern narratives. Every partner leaves a trace, chemically, neurologically, psychologically. Each encounter rewires a little more of the brain's capacity for attachment, not ideology, not opinion. Simple human wiring. Think of it like this. If you press the same piece of tape onto a wall once, it sticks. Do it 10 times, it still holds. But do it 100 times. Peel, stick, peel, stick. Eventually, the adhesive is gone. It looks the same, but it no longer bonds. Most men today step into relationships without realizing they are investing their time, their loyalty, and their resources into someone whose ability to emotionally attach has already been quietly eroded. And when the relationship begins to feel hollow, they blame themselves. But here is the real question most men never ask. If a woman's past shapes her ability to bond, are there signs that reveal it even when she never speaks about it? Stoic thinkers believe that wisdom begins where comfortable illusions end. So today, we are going to examine something most people are too afraid to talk about openly. 7 behavioral signs that quietly expose a woman's real body count. Not gossip, not rumors. Observable psychological patterns. And pay very close attention to sign number 5, because it is the one trait most men mistake for high value, when in reality, it is often the clearest signal that intimacy has become nothing more than a transaction. If you are ready to see the dynamics of modern dating without filters, without comforting lies, press like and let the algorithm know you came here for the truth. Let's begin. 1. The absence of microanxiety, the technician. This first sign is the one that traps the most men, because when you see it, you think you got lucky. You meet her. Conversation flows. The tension builds. The moment finally comes when the distance closes and things turn intimate, and something strange happens. Nothing. No hesitation. No nervous laugh. No clumsy moment where two human beings are figuring each other out. Everything is smooth. Too smooth. Her hands don't search. They arrive. Her movements are not curious. They are precise. Her timing is perfect. The first time it happens, most men feel proud. They lean back mentally and think, damn, the chemistry between us is insane. But stop for a moment and ask yourself something uncomfortable. Is it chemistry or choreography? Because real chemistry between two people has friction. There is awkwardness. There is a moment where both nervous systems are firing at the same time. Your heart beats faster. Your brain becomes hyperaware. Your guard drops and part of you thinks this is dangerous. That tension is biological. Intimacy at its core is vulnerability. It is two people stepping into unknown territory together. But when someone has repeated the same scenario dozens, sometimes hundreds of times, something changes inside the nervous system. The danger disappears. The novelty disappears. The sacredness of the moment disappears. And what replaces it is efficiency. I once heard a man describe this experience in a way that stuck with me. He said it felt like she had already been there before. Not the room, the situation. Every movement she made looked rehearsed, like watching an actor deliver lines they have practiced so many times they no longer feel them. And that is when the illusion cracks. Because what you initially read as confidence is often just muscle memory. The Stoics had a way of looking at human behavior that most people today refuse to adopt. They looked for signals that contradicted the story people were telling. And when a moment that should naturally carry nervous energy feels cold, mechanical, and strangely optimized, that is not confidence. That is desensitization. Her nervous system has been conditioned through repetition. Think about the first time you ever did something risky. Your first fight. Your first big business deal. Your first time driving fast on an empty road. Your body reacts. Adrenaline surges. Your senses sharpen. Your awareness expands. But repeat that same action enough times and eventually the reaction fades. The edge disappears. What once felt intense now feels routine. And the same principle applies to intimacy. A woman with very little experience often carries a subtle nervous reverence for the moment. Even when she tries to hide it, you can feel it in the small things, the slight pause, the shy glance, the moment where she laughs because her emotions outrun her composure. It is human, imperfect, alive, but when intimacy feels like a perfectly executed routine, something else is happening. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the pornification of intimacy, not because of explicit behavior, but because the moment becomes performative. Watch closely. Does she occasionally glance at your reaction, like a comedian checking if the audience laughed at the punchline? Do certain actions feel oddly theatrical, like something designed to impress rather than connect? Does the whole moment feel efficient, almost optimized, but strangely empty underneath? If so, what you are experiencing may not be genuine connection, it is performance. And here is the strange part. Many women who operate this way do not even realize what happened to them. In their mind, they believe they are simply being skilled, attentive, experienced. But somewhere along the way, something was quietly traded. Connection was replaced with performance. Presence was replaced with routine. And the difference is subtle, but once you have felt it, you never forget it. She can give you pleasure. Yes, but that trembling surrender that comes from someone who is still emotionally intact, that rare moment where two people genuinely discover each other, that is no longer there too. The cool girl detachment, stoicism versus dissociation. Most men cannot tell the difference, and that confusion has ruined more relationships than almost anything else in modern dating. You start seeing her and at first she feels perfect. She does not question where you were. She does not demand constant reassurance. She encourages you to go out with your friends. You mention something politically incorrect, she laughs. You think to yourself, finally, a woman who is not dramatic. For many men, this is the dream. The mythical cool girl, no jealousy, no emotional storms, no pressure. At first, it feels like freedom. But watch carefully what happens over time, because real emotional security looks warm. This often feels cold. She does not ask deeper questions about your life. She does not remember details about the stories you tell. You mention something personal, something from your past, and her reaction is polite but distant, almost like she is listening from behind glass. And eventually, a strange realization creeps in. She is not calm, she is detached. And those are two very different things. A stoic person feels deeply but remains composed. A dissociated person has simply numbed the connection entirely. And when you start examining the history behind this behavior, the pattern becomes clearer. A woman who has gone through the cycle repeatedly, attraction, excitement, intimacy, separation, over and over again eventually adapts. The brain protects itself, because attachment followed by loss dozens of times is exhausting. So the nervous system quietly installs a defense mechanism. Never attach too deeply in the first place. In developmental psychology, there is a concept called object permanence. A child eventually learns that something still exists even when they cannot see it. Healthy relationships operate on the same principle. You carry the emotional presence of someone even when they are not in the room. But when someone has experienced too many temporary bonds, the brain starts treating people like temporary events, like weather patterns. They arrive. They create a brief emotional high, and then they disappear. So why invest deeply? Why build emotional roots? From her perspective, men have always been temporary. A few months of dopamine, then the next chapter begins. So when she meets you, her subconscious already categorizes you the same way. Another season. This is why you sometimes notice something unsettling. A lack of curiosity about your inner world. She will ask surface questions. How was your day? But she does not store the answer. She forgets the names of people important to you. She does not remember the things that shaped you. Not because she is cruel, because somewhere inside her brain stopped opening new emotional folders. Temporary files do not require long-term storage. Now, compare that with a woman whose capacity for bonding is still intact. She pays attention. She remembers things you told her weeks ago. She notices shifts in your mood before you even speak. And yes, there is usually a hint of possessiveness, not toxic control, but protective interest. Because humans instinctively guard what they value. But the woman who has learned that people are temporary rarely guards anything. Not you. Not the connection. not the relationship, because deep down she already believes the same ending will repeat again. You are not building something permanent together. In her mind, she is simply renting the experience. 3. The weaponization of the past. Triangulation. Now listen carefully to how she talks about the men who came before you. Most men hear these stories and feel sympathy. They lean in. They want to protect her. They want to be the man who finally treats her right. And that instinct is exactly what traps them. Because there are two versions of this sign, two different masks, and both reveal the same underlying pattern. The first one is the trauma narrator. You are sitting somewhere casual, maybe a bar, maybe her apartment, maybe driving somewhere late at night. The conversation drifts into the past and suddenly the stories start pouring out. My ex was toxic. My last boyfriend was abusive. The guy before him was manipulative. That one was crazy. That one was jealous. That one was insecure. The list keeps going. 5 men, 15 men, all villains. And she is always the wounded survivor. At first, a man feels empathy. That is a normal reaction. But after a certain point, a question should quietly start forming in your mind. How many crazy exes can exist before the pattern stops being coincidence? Because here is something most men are too polite to say out loud. High-value women do not repeatedly select chaos. Once or twice, that is life. Everyone makes mistakes. But when every past relationship ends in destruction and every former partner becomes a monster in the story, you are no longer hearing a tragedy. You are hearing a pattern. And patterns reveal preference. Some people become addicted to emotional chaos because chaos recreates the intensity their nervous system no longer feels naturally. Drama becomes the substitute for genuine connection. But the second version of this sign is quieter, colder, more calculated. This is where triangulation appears. You are having dinner. Maybe you mention a place you like and she casually drops something like, "Oh, my ex took me there once." You ignore it. A few minutes later, "That reminds me of this guy I met in Tulum." Later again, "Yeah, one guy I dated used to do that all the time." Individually, these comments feel harmless. But together, they create a subtle psychological environment. You are no longer alone with her. You are sitting at the table with ghosts, phantom competitors, men you have never met, but whose presence she quietly introduces into the conversation. In dark psychology, this tactic has a name. Triangulation. The purpose is simple. Raise perceived value by implying abundance. If other men desired her, your brain instinctively feels pressure not to lose her. And suddenly, without realizing it, you begin competing with people who are not even there. But here is the Stoic perspective most men forget. A woman who respects the present does not invite the ghosts of the past into the room. When someone constantly references previous lovers, experiences, comparisons, they are revealing how they see relationships. Not as sacred connections, but as data points. If she tells you stories about things she did with other men, if she compares what you do to what someone else used to do, if certain experiences were offered freely to strangers in the past but suddenly become too intimate with you, understand what is happening. You are not being evaluated as a unique individual. You are being benchmarked. You are not John. You are entry number 47 in a psychological spreadsheet compared silently against a catalogue of men who came before you. But when a woman has experienced fewer relationships, something very different happens. Each man becomes a chapter in her life story, a significant era, not something she casually brings into conversation like old restaurant reviews. Those memories stay private. They carry weight. But when the number becomes large enough, those experiences blur together. Faces fade, stories overlap, and eventually men become interchangeable. When you feel that subtle sense that you are being measured against invisible competitors, trust that instinct. Because often you are. 4. The male best friend. The orbit. This is the one weak men love to defend. She is just one of the guys. She grew up around men. She just gets along with men better. You have heard the script before, but let's slow down and examine the reality behind it. A woman who keeps a circle of male friends is not operating inside the same psychological framework as a man with female friends. The dynamics are completely different, because male attention carries a biological currency, and many women learn very early in life how powerful that currency can be. Look closely at the pattern. There are always a few familiar characters, The guy who constantly likes her photos. The one who texts late at night. The one who is always available when she needs help moving, fixing something, or venting about life. He is such a good friend. But if you watch the interaction carefully, something else becomes obvious. The tension is not neutral. He would sleep with her if given the opportunity. And both of them know it. Those men are not friends. They are reserves. Emergency options. Break glass in case of loneliness. A woman who has lived inside the dopamine cycle of casual attention often becomes addicted to it. Every notification, every compliment, every message. Small hits of validation. And the easiest way to maintain that supply is by keeping a cord of orbiting men. Maybe she still follows old flings on Instagram. Maybe she keeps conversations alive with men who clearly want her. Maybe she goes out for coffee with someone who obviously hopes for more while telling you not to worry. He is like a brother. But brothers do not look at their sisters the way those men look at her. And deep down, every man watching this knows that. Now ask yourself something simple. If she is investing emotional energy into 5 different men, where exactly is the energy for you supposed to come from? Attention is finite. Time is finite. Emotional bandwidth is finite. The man who understands this does not argue. He does not beg. He does not demand she cut people off. He simply observes the structure of the situation. Because the truth is brutally simple. Some women build relationships like portfolios. One man provides emotional support. Another provides advice. Another provides attention. Another provides excitement. And you provide intimacy. But that is not a relationship. That is a corporation. And you are not the partner. You are a department. The Stoic man sees this dynamic clearly. And he does something most men are too afraid to do. He removes himself, not out of anger, not out of jealousy, but out of self-respect. Because he understands a simple principle most men learn too late. You cannot fill a cup that has no bottom. 5. The chameleon effect. Identity fragmentation. I warned you about this one earlier. Because this is the sign that tricks even experienced men. You meet her and everything lines up almost too perfectly. The same music, the same obscure podcasts, the same niche opinions about politics, culture, the world. You mention some random hobby most people have never even heard of. And suddenly she loves that too. At first it feels magical. You think, finally, a woman who actually gets me. You tell your friends she is different. But let me ask you something uncomfortable. How often does lightning strike the same place that perfectly? Because what many men interpret as compatibility is often something else entirely. Mirroring. A psychological mechanism. When a woman bonds with a man, she naturally absorbs pieces of him, his energy, his tastes, his worldview. That is part of pair bonding. It happens on both sides to some degree. But when someone has repeated that process dozens of times with dozens of different men, something strange happens to the personality. It starts to fragment. Imagine taking pieces from 50 different puzzles and trying to build a single picture. That is what identity fragmentation looks like. Over time, she learns something very powerful. Different men respond to different versions of her, so she adapts. With the conservative man, she becomes traditional. With the party guy, she becomes wild. With the intellectual, suddenly she is deeply philosophical. With the gym guy, she becomes obsessed with discipline and self-improvement. She becomes whatever environment rewards her. At first, it feels incredible to the man in front of her, because she fits your world so seamlessly. But what you are often seeing is not authenticity, it is adaptation, a survival skill, a chameleon. And here is where the illusion eventually cracks. Usually somewhere between the 3rd and 6th month, small things start shifting. The music she loved suddenly annoys her. The opinions she passionately agreed with begin to change. The hobbies she seemed excited about disappear. And the man sitting there starts feeling confused. Wait, you love this? No, I did not. Yes, you did. No, that was just something I was trying. And slowly it hits you. The person you thought you met was temporary. A reflection, a mask built specifically for you. Men experience this moment like psychological whiplash, because the personality they bonded with slowly dissolves. And the deeper tragedy is that many women living this pattern do not even realize it themselves. When your identity becomes a collection of adaptations to different men, eventually you lose track of which version is actually yours. This is why women with extremely chaotic romantic histories often struggle with depression and identity crisis later in life. They look in the mirror and something feels hollow, because the mirror no longer reflects a stable self. It reflects fragments, pieces borrowed from men who are no longer there. So if a woman appears almost too perfectly aligned with you, if she mirrors your entire worldview within weeks, if there is zero friction between your identities, be careful. You may not be falling in love with a person. You may be falling in love with your own reflection projected back at you by someone who no longer knows who she really is. 6. The speed of intimacy. The discounted gate. Let's talk about something most people pretend not to understand. In economics, when supply increases, price drops. That principle applies everywhere in life, and intimacy is no exception. Across cultures, across time, one dynamic has remained consistent. Women control access to sex. Men control access to commitment. That balance creates the negotiation between the two. Now think about what happens when that balance collapses. You meet a woman. Within hours, the gate is open. Within days, everything is available. No investment required, no time needed, no emotional filtering process, and many men interpret this as luck. They think, I must be special. But step outside the moment for a second. If something extremely valuable is offered with zero barrier, what does that usually signal? That the market price has collapsed. Now listen carefully. This is not about shaming anyone for enjoying intimacy. That is not the point. The point is investment. Human beings value what requires effort, what requires patience, what requires time. When a woman gives the most intimate part of herself immediately without asking for emotional or personal investment first, she is revealing the framework she operates from. But the deeper signal often appears later. Watch what happens during tension. When a disagreement appears, when you ask uncomfortable questions, when accountability enters the conversation, does she suddenly shift the energy? Does she try to dissolve the conflict physically instead of addressing it? Does intimacy become a distraction tool? Because when intimacy becomes currency, it stops being connection. It becomes leverage. Some women learn through repeated relationships that their personality alone cannot keep a man. Their presence alone cannot keep a man. Their peace alone cannot keep a man. So they rely on the one tool that has always worked before. Sexual access. Not as connection, but as control. You will see the pattern clearly once you recognize it. Arguments end with seduction. Difficult conversations disappear through distraction. Accountability dissolves the moment physical tension is introduced. And slowly the relationship becomes transactional. Closeness exchanged for compliance. Now compare that with a woman whose ability to bond is still intact. She does not rush the gate, not because she is playing games, but because she needs to feel safe first. She studies you. She watches your behavior. She invests emotionally before opening that door. Because intimacy to her is not a tactic. It is a consequence of trust. But the woman who has experienced dozens of temporary men often does the opposite. She opens the gate immediately, not out of confidence, out of fear. Fear that if she slows things down, you will leave. Fear that if she asks for emotional investment first, you will disappear like the others. So she assumes the script she believes all men follow. You only want one thing, and she offers it first, hoping this time maybe the man stays. It is tragic on a human level. But for the man searching for a woman capable of building a life, it is a dangerous signal, because a gate that opens for everyone protects nothing. 7. The inability to be alone. The silence of the void. This is the final sign. And once you see it, the rest of them suddenly make sense. Watch what happens when she is single. Not when she is with you. Not when things are going well. Watch what she does in the quiet space between relationships. Because that space reveals everything. Some people can sit with themselves. They disappear for a while. They read. They rebuild their life. They think. They take 6 months, sometimes a year, and they face their own mind. But other people cannot tolerate that silence. The moment a relationship ends, there is panic. Within days, she is already talking to someone new. Within weeks, she is dating again. Within a month, there is another connection. Sometimes the next man appears before the previous one has even fully left. You have seen it, one branch immediately replaced by another. That is why people call it monkey branching. But here is the truth most men misunderstand. A high body count is rarely the result of uncontrollable libido. It is almost always the result of something darker, the inability to sit alone with your own thoughts. Because when the noise stops, something uncomfortable starts speaking. Regret, old trauma, loneliness, self-doubt, and many people will do anything to silence that voice. A new relationship is the perfect distraction. The attention of a new man, the excitement of new intimacy, the dopamine hit of being desired again. All of it creates noise. Noise that drowns out the emptiness underneath. I once spoke to a man who described this pattern perfectly. He said, every woman I dated had the same timeline. 6 months with one guy. Break up. 2 weeks later, new boyfriend. 6 months later, break up. 2 weeks later, new boyfriend. Over and over again. No pause, no reflection, no healing. Just a conveyor belt of men rotating through the same emotional position. And eventually, he realized something chilling. None of those men were actually partners. They were distractions, temporary emotional bandages. Because when someone jumps from relationship to relationship with zero breathing room, something important never happens. Processing. Every man leaves psychological residue, memories, resentments, trauma. If there is no time to process those things, they do not disappear. They accumulate. And eventually, you are no longer dealing with one woman. You are dealing with the emotional ghosts of every man who came before you. 10 men, 15 men, 20 men. All their unresolved baggage quietly sitting in the room with you. And eventually the weight becomes too heavy. That is when the pattern repeats. You stop being exciting enough. You stop being distracting enough. The dopamine fades and suddenly she is looking for the next source of stimulation. Not because you failed, but because you were never meant to stay. The Stoic lesson here is brutal but simple. You cannot build a home on shifting ground. A woman who cannot exist peacefully alone will struggle to remain loyal inside a relationship. Because her loyalty is not to the man. It is to the dopamine. Now I can already hear some of the objections forming. But the past is the past. Men do the same thing. You are just insecure. Listen carefully. You can drive a car with 300,000 miles on it. It might still start. It might still get you from one place to another. But you do not walk into a dealership and pay the price of a brand new Ferrari for a vehicle that has already been driven into the ground. And you certainly do not expect it to run forever without breaking down. This is not about hatred. It is about risk. Relationships are the biggest investment a man will ever make. Choose the wrong partner and you risk your finances, your mental health, your peace, your legacy. Divorce courts are filled with men who thought love alone would override reality. So, why would you make the biggest investment of your life without checking the history of the vehicle? The modern world wants you to believe something convenient, that everyone is interchangeable. That biology is irrelevant. That pair bonding is just a myth invented by insecure men. But look around. Broken families, fatherless homes, lonely people chasing endless validation through strangers. This system is not an accident. A society full of emotionally fractured individuals is profitable. Lonely people consume more. Confused people are easier to manipulate. But if you are a man trying to build something real, something lasting, you have a responsibility to see clearly, not emotionally, rationally. If you notice these patterns, mechanical intimacy, the ghosts of past lovers constantly appearing in conversation, the chameleon personality that shifts every few months, the orbit of male friends providing endless validation, the inability to exist peacefully alone, do not try to fix it. You are not a rehabilitation center. You are a man with a direction. Stoicism teaches a hard truth most people refuse to accept. You cannot control another person's past. You cannot repair psychological damage you did not cause. But you can control one thing, who you allow into your inner circle, who you build a future with, who becomes the mother of your children. And here is the twist most men do not expect. Some of you watching this right now are recognizing something uncomfortable. You have some of these signs too. You have become numb. You chase validation through numbers. You collect bodies to fill a void. And then you wonder why the women you attract are equally broken. There is an old principle most men learn too late. You attract what you are. If you want a woman capable of deep loyalty, deep respect, deep emotional connection, you must become the kind of man who can handle that kind of woman. That requires transformation. It requires killing the boy inside you that still begs for validation and replacing him with the man who does not chase approval. He commands respect. The man who becomes the gravitational center of his world. The man whose presence alone filters out chaos. Before you leave, understand something important. Most men think the real danger in modern dating is what a woman says. It is not. The real danger is the test she gives you without ever speaking a word. A small moment. A subtle behavior. A situation that looks completely ordinary on the surface. But inside that moment, she is quietly measuring you. Not your money. Not your looks, your frame. She is trying to answer one silent question. Are you just another temporary man, or the one man she cannot manipulate? And here is the part almost no one realizes. She often does not even know she is doing it. It is instinct, biology, a psychological filter that determines whether she places you in the category of men she eventually discards or the rare man she cannot replace. In the next video, I am going to break down the exact test she gives. The one that determines whether she sees you as temporary or irreplaceable. If you think you understand the game now, wait until you see that. That video drops tomorrow. But for now, if you want to go deeper into the psychology behind attraction and power dynamics, watch the video appearing on your screen right now. It connects directly to everything we talked about today. And once you see it, a lot of things in your past relationships will suddenly make sense. Click the video on your screen and continue. And if this video opened your eyes even a little, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Most men will never understand the game, but you do. I will see you among the strong.